What if the reason you can't sleep at night isn't because of the problem itself, but because your soul has been quietly suffocating under the weight of something deeper, something no one ever told you had a name? That name is anguish. And it doesn't just visit your heart. It steals your peace, devours your silence, and replaces it with a noise that never stops. Maybe you've felt it, that quiet panic behind your smile, the weight in your chest as you scroll through life pretending you're okay. Maybe you've whispered prayers into the dark, wondering if Allah is listening, or if you're too broken to be heard. But tonight, something sacred is about to unfold. Tonight is not just another video. Tonight Allah might set you free, because the Qur'an doesn't ignore your anguish. It names it, it holds it, and then it teaches you how to let it go. Few people know this, but inside the Qur'an are hidden answers to questions you've been silently screaming. Why does peace feel so far away? Why does your heart feel like a prisoner, even when your life looks fine on the outside? And most importantly, what does Allah actually say about your pain? This is not a motivational talk. It's a divine invitation. You didn't stumble here by chance. You were guided. The fact that you're hearing this message could be Allah responding to a dua you made in tears, or maybe in silence when words failed. And this video might be the exact ayah you didn't know your soul had been waiting for. But before we get there, you need to hear something that might shake everything you thought you knew about suffering. Because anguish doesn't mean you're weak. It might mean that Allah is preparing you for something extraordinary. And the Quran holds stories of prophets, of heartbreak, of impossible endings that turned into divine beginnings that were placed there for people exactly like you. So don't blink, don't click away, because somewhere in this video, there's a verse. And once you hear it, you won't see your pain the same way again. Before we dive deeper, breathe, gently, whisper Bismillah, because what you're about to hear could shift something inside you. Perhaps tonight your heart will finally recognize a truth that your mind has been avoiding. This message, this sacred reminder from the Quran, isn't just information. It's a conversation your soul has been craving. And maybe it's an answer Allah is sending to you right now through this screen. So let me ask you, if this message touches your heart, declare it. Don't stay silent. Write in the comments, I trust Allah, as your public act of faith. This isn't about engagement metrics. It's about saying out loud what your soul already believes. And if you're struggling to say it, type it anyway. That comment may be the first step to healing, or maybe it's your way of telling Allah, I'm still here. And if even a small part of this message brings light to your heart, click like, not for vanity, but as an act of sadaqah jariyah. Maybe your click is what makes this message reach someone else who's drowning in silence, someone who needs to remember that Allah sees their anguish too. And if your heart whispers, this is what I've been looking for, then know, you're home. Subscribe. This space is more than a channel. It's a community of souls longing for peace, for purpose, for Allah. You're not alone, not here, because what's coming next might reveal what no one ever told you about pain. And believe me, you need to hear what Allah revealed about your anguish. Before you leave this video, let's continue. The water was rising, not just the physical sea that stretched endlessly before them, but the waves of panic, of uncertainty, of fear that gripped every heart in Bani Israel that day. Behind them, Pharaoh's army, roaring, thundering, determined to crush them. In front of them, nothing but a sea with no visible escape. And standing at the edge of this impossible dilemma was Musa a.s., a prophet, a man chosen by Allah. But even prophets feel the weight of anguish. Even prophets stand in front of oceans they cannot cross alone. Can you see it? The sand under his feet trembling, children crying, the people losing hope, turning to him with eyes full of desperation. That moment, that breath before surrender or panic, is the very place many of us are standing in today. Except your Red Sea might look different. It might be the debt that's drowning you, the diagnosis that shattered your plans, the relationship that ended with no explanation, the opportunities that closed, the fear of what tomorrow might bring. But the feeling is the same, stuck, surrounded, afraid, and unsure of where to turn. And this is where something divine happens. In the heart of fear, Allah places a statement on the tongue of Musa, HES, that still echoes across time. He said, "Indeed, with me is my Lord, He will guide me." Surah Ash-Shu'ara 26:62. He didn't say maybe or I hope. He didn't wait for the sea to split before trusting Allah. He declared it while everything still looked impossible, because real peace doesn't come from having the answer. It comes from trusting that Allah already wrote the answer, even when you haven't seen it yet. Isn't that exactly where your soul is aching? You're walking through life with questions that keep circling in your head. What if it never gets better? What if I fail? What if I'm not strong enough to survive this storm? And the truth is, none of us are, not on our own. But when you bring Allah into the equation, when you say what Musa said, something shifts inside you, because peace doesn't mean the storm disappears. Peace means knowing Allah is with you inside the storm. Let me ask you, how many nights have you cried yourself to sleep, not because something happened, but because nothing changed? Because you keep making dua and still feel stuck at the edge of your own ocean? Have you ever considered that this pause, this silence, might be the exact moment where Allah wants you to stop looking at the problem and start looking up? What if He hasn't moved the sea, because He's waiting for your heart to move first? There's a secret in this ayah, a formula few people notice. Musa doesn't just say, Allah is with me. He says, He will guide me. He believes in the guidance before the guidance comes. This is tawakkul, not passive hope, active, conscious surrender. And that's the real freedom the Quran offers, the kind of spiritual liberation that breaks every mental chain and brings peace even while the storm still rages. Have you been taught that uncertainty is weakness, that fear means you don't have enough iman? Then let me ask you something harder. What if the very presence of that fear is your invitation to get closer to Allah? What if your storm is not a punishment, but a path? When Musa lifted his staff and the sea split, it wasn't just water that moved. It was history. It was destiny. It was the moment when anguish lost its power, not because the problem disappeared, but because the heart chose trust over panic. This is the freedom the Quran promises, not a life without hardship, but a heart that's unshakable in the middle of it. Comment below, I choose trust over fear. Make it your act of worship. Let your words be your first step into the sea of tawakkul. If you're reading this with trembling hands, unsure if Allah will guide you, say it anyway. This might be your moment. Let your declaration be heard by the one who parts oceans for his servants. But there's something few people talk about, something hidden inside this verse that might change how you see everything. Because if you thought the Red Sea was the climax of Musa's story, you're about to be surprised. She was alone, not just physically, emotionally, spiritually, in every possible way that matters. Maryam Ayaz, the one chosen above all women, was now isolated under a palm tree, her body trembling in labor, her heart heavy with shame, fear, and unbearable loneliness. Imagine this moment. She wasn't surrounded by warmth or support. There was no one rubbing her back, no comforting voice telling her it would be okay. There were only the scorching winds of the desert, the stillness of a tree, and the sound of her own breath, shallow, desperate. The anguish she felt wasn't just from pain. It was from being abandoned, misunderstood, judged by a world that didn't know the truth. She cried out, I wish I had died before this, and was in oblivion, forgotten. That was the depth of her sorrow. And yet, in that very place of despair, in that moment of total breakdown, a voice came, a voice that changed everything. Grieve not. Your Lord has placed a stream beneath you. Surah Maryam, 1924. A stream, in the middle of the desert, in the middle of despair. When no one else could see her, Allah did. When no one else could comfort her, He did. How many of us have felt this type of isolation, when you're surrounded by people, but your heart feels like it's screaming in a language no one understands? When you walk into a room full of laughter and your soul feels like it's buried 6 feet under? Maybe it's because of a heartbreak no one knows about. Maybe it's the quiet anxiety you hide behind, I'm fine. Or maybe like Maryam, you're carrying something in your life, a secret, a shame, a test, and it feels like no one would believe you if you told them. That kind of solitude doesn't just make you feel alone. It makes you question your worth, your faith, your existence. But the Quran doesn't leave you there. Allah doesn't leave you there. Because the very pain that convinced you that you were abandoned is often the doorway to the deepest form of spiritual nearness. There's something powerful you need to realize. Maryam's moment of despair didn't come when she was disobedient. It came while she was doing exactly what Allah had commanded, which means, and here comes the truth that no one talks about, obedience doesn't exempt you from anguish. Sometimes it leads you straight into it, but not to break you, to birth something greater. Think about this. Allah could have placed Maryam in comfort, surrounded by people, shielded from the judgment. But He chose solitude, Why? Because he was preparing her for a miracle, and miracles are often born in silence, in isolation, in pain. You feel unseen, but he sees you. You feel unheard, but he is listening. You feel forgotten, but he is closer to you than your own heartbeat. And when Allah says, grieve not, he's not dismissing your pain. He's redirecting your attention away from what you lost, toward what he's about to give. What if your loneliness is sacred space? What if your solitude is not rejection but selection? Allah isolates those he loves, not to harm them, but to heal them, to elevate them, to pour into them directly, without the noise of the world getting in the way. Maryam was chosen, and she still felt that pain. That means you can be deeply loved by Allah and still feel shattered. It doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. It means you're in the exact place where Allah can whisper directly to your soul. Close your eyes, breathe. Think of the stream that appeared beneath Maryam, in the very moment she thought it was over. Do you think he can't do the same for you? The relief you seek may not come from outside. It may rise from within, from the moment you stop trying to be understood by people and start pouring your heart out to the one who already knows every corner of it. Comment below, Ya Allah, I feel alone, but I know you are near. Let this be your act of faith, not just a sentence, a supplication, a whisper from your soul to the heavens. Write it as if you're placing your pain in the hands of the only one who can hold it without dropping it. But there's something deeper here, something most people miss, because what Allah provided Maryam was not just water, it was a message. And what that message really means might shake everything you thought you knew about feeling abandoned. He had run, not just from a place, but from the weight of his mission, the pressure of rejection, the burden of his own expectations. Prophet Yunus, A.S., overwhelmed and exhausted, turned away. And for a moment it seemed like escape would give him relief. But sometimes, what feels like relief becomes a prison. And in his case, that prison took the shape of darkness, 3 layers deep. The darkness of the night, the darkness of the sea, and the darkness of the belly of the whale. Imagine that. Total silence. No air, no escape, no light. Only you, your thoughts, and the echo of your regrets. Have you ever felt like that? Like you're buried beneath the weight of your own mistakes? Like the past is chasing you, whispering, you'll never be forgiven. You'll never be free. Maybe it was one decision, one sin, one betrayal as to yourself, to others, to Allah. And now it sits in your chest like a stone, stealing every ounce of your peace. The kind of guilt that doesn't let you look in the mirror without flinching, that makes you feel unworthy of love, unworthy of mercy. But this is where the story shifts, not when Yunus is rescued, but when he realizes what his soul forgot. In that place of deepest pain, he calls out to Allah with a dua that would shake the heavens. There is no deity except you. Exalted are you. Indeed, I have been of the wrongdoers. Surah Al-Anbiya 2187. And suddenly the wail doesn't feel like a punishment. It feels like a turning point. Because it's in that darkness that something extraordinary happens. The layers of shame are peeled back. And what remains is not a prophet in disgrace, but a servant remembering who his Lord is. You see, guilt isn't the enemy. The real enemy is hopelessness. The real prison isn't your mistake, and it's the belief that your mistake has more power than Allah's mercy. But it doesn't. It never did. The Quran reveals something many people overlook, that this very dua, this cry of surrender, was not just accepted. It was recorded as a timeless formula for liberation, for anyone, anywhere, who feels crushed by their past. And here's the secret. Allah didn't wait for Yunus to prove himself. He responded when Yunus admitted his weakness, which means your healing doesn't start when you become better. It starts when you become honest, when you stop pretending you're okay, when you finally collapse into sujood and say, Ya Allah, I was wrong. But that collapse isn't a sign of failure, it's a beginning. Because do you know what comes right after this verse? Allah says, so we responded to him and saved him from the distress, and thus do we save the believers. This isn't just Yunus's story, it's a pattern, a promise, a path. So why do we carry so much anguish over the past? Why do we let guilt steal our ability to love, to hope, to breathe? Because we've forgotten what Allah already declared. His mercy encompasses all things, including the things you're too ashamed to name. Maybe the reason you haven't moved forward is because you still believe you have to punish yourself before Allah forgives you. But that's not His way. That's not the message of the Quran. He wants your return, not your perfection. He wants your brokenness, not your performance. He wants your dua, not your delay. Comment below, Ya Allah, forgive me and set me free. Let it be a moment of honesty between your heart and your Creator. Let it be the first brick in rebuilding the peace you thought was lost forever. Type it as if your soul is whispering it, because perhaps this is the prayer that breaks the chains around your heart. If this message touched something deep inside you, click like, not for numbers, but as a sadaqah jariyah. Maybe this is how someone else will find this reminder too. And share this video with someone you know is drowning in shame. You could be the reason their heart remembers Allah's door is always open, but the story doesn't end there. Because what happened to Yunus after this moment holds a lesson that very few truly understand. He didn't see it coming. One moment he was surrounded by voices he trusted, by faces that carried the same blood, the same childhood stories, the same home, and the next, the people who should have protected him were the ones who threw him into darkness. Yusuf, A.S., was betrayed not by strangers, but by his own brothers. Those who smiled with him, ate with him, called him family. That's what made it worse. Because betrayal is never about the act itself. It's about who did it. It's the way a familiar voice can suddenly sound like a stranger. The way a heart that once loved you can become the one that hurts you most. As Yusuf sat alone at the bottom of that well, with cold walls and no light, can you imagine the questions racing through his heart? Why would they do this to me? What did I do to deserve this? How could they smile while throwing me away? That's the anguish of betrayal. It's not just the wound. It's the confusion, the disorientation, the way it steals your ability to trust, to rest, to believe in good again. And maybe you've been there too. Maybe not in a well, but in a relationship that collapsed without explanation. In a friendship that turned toxic. In a family that chose silence when you needed protection. Maybe someone took advantage of your vulnerability and left you bleeding in a place only Allah could see. Betrayal doesn't just break trust. It breaks your sense of safety. It shatters the idea that love is supposed to protect, not destroy. But this story doesn't stop at the bottom of the well. The Qur'an takes us through every chapter of Yusuf's journey, from the depths of despair to the heights of leadership. And along the way, Allah reminds us again and again he was never alone. Every step of Yusuf's pain was written, witnessed, honored, and eventually transformed. There's a verse that comes much later in his story when everything has come full circle. Yusuf is standing in a position of power. His brothers are before him, broken, ashamed, exposed, and in that moment, he doesn't say, "You destroyed me." He says, "Indeed, my Lord is subtle in what he wills. Indeed, it is he who is the knowing, the wise." Surah Yusuf 12:100. This is the power of divine healing. This is what happens when you stop needing closure from people and start finding clarity through Allah. Yusuf didn't wait for an apology to find peace. He didn't carry bitterness just because justice was delayed. He understood something deeper, that Allah sees what you can't, and he writes every betrayal with the ink of eventual restoration. So the question is, are you holding on to the pain or the promise? Are you letting the betrayal define your worth or allowing it to redirect your heart toward the one who heals? Because what Yusuf teaches us is that the betrayal wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a transformation. Sometimes those who push you into the dark are unknowingly pushing you toward your light. Sometimes your rejection is your redirection. Let yourself feel the pain, but don't let it become your identity. Your heart was not created to stay in bitterness. Your soul wasn't designed to rot in resentment. Yes, what they did was wrong, but what Allah can do with that wrong is beyond anything you could imagine. Let go of the illusion that your healing will come from those who hurt you. Real healing begins when you surrender your wound to the one who never wronged you, the one who, like with Yusuf, was writing a story of victory even while you were still crying in the well. Comment below, "I release the betrayal to Allah." Let it be more than a comment. Let it be your first step to emotional freedom, your declaration that you will not allow someone else's darkness to keep your soul buried. Type it as a witness between your heart and your Lord. Ya Allah, you saw what they did, and I trust what you will do. But that's not the most shocking part of Yusuf's journey, because what comes next reveals a divine twist that flips the entire idea of justice upside down. He held the blood-stained shirt of his beloved son with trembling hands. There was no body, only absence and a poorly told lie. His own sons handed him the evidence, and though their mouths offered excuses, everything else screamed betrayal. Yet Yaqub, A.S., didn't erupt in rage. He didn't curse. He didn't retaliate. He turned inward, not out of weakness, but out of unwavering faith. He carried a pain so immense that the world couldn't comprehend it, and yet every ounce of that grief ran in one direction, toward Allah. Imagine losing the one you love the most, not in a way that gives closure, not with a funeral or a goodbye, but through a disappearance that offers only questions. Imagine waking up each day with their face burned into your memory and falling asleep with the ache of their absence pressing against your chest. This is the kind of grief that doesn't leave. It sits beside you at the dinner table. It lingers in your sujud. It becomes a shadow that walks with you. And maybe you know exactly what that feels like. Maybe you lost someone, not just to death but to distance, divorce, silence. Maybe they're still alive but no longer in your life, and every day feels a little emptier. You laugh but only halfway. You pray, but something aches even in your sajda, and the question whispers through your chest, will I ever feel whole again? But Yaqub A.S. didn't numb his emotions. He didn't wear a mask of forced strength. He wept, so much that his eyes went blind. He said it, openly and unashamed, I only complain of my suffering and my grief to Allah. Surah Yusuf 12:86. And in that one sentence, he teaches us something powerful, that your sadness is not a betrayal of your faith, that pouring your pain into dua is not weakness, it is worship, that the Quran does not ask you to erase your grief but to elevate it, to hand it over to the one who mends what no one else sees. Too many people are told, just be strong, move on, or worse, maybe you're being punished. But what if that grief you carry is not a punishment but a passage? What if Allah misses your voice in dua? What if this pain is what reconnects you to the only source of peace that doesn't leave? Because look at Yaqub's story. He waited years, decades, and yet he never let the anguish harden his heart. He never stopped believing that Allah could still bring beauty from ashes. And eventually, he did. The son he thought was lost returned, and not only did he returned as a king. But that's not the real miracle. The miracle is that before Yusuf came back, Yaqub's vision returned. Before the external restoration came the internal healing. Why? Because healing starts within. Because peace doesn't begin when the pain ends. It begins when you hand that pain to Allah. So what about you? Are you holding grief in your chest like it's a burden you have to carry alone? Are you silently asking, does Allah even see how much I'm hurting? The answer is in the very surah that describes this story. Allah chose to record Yaqub's grief, not to shame it but to honor it. What if the pain you feel is not proof of your weakness, but proof of your capacity to love deeply? What if Allah is not asking you to move on, but to move closer to Him? Comment below, Ya Allah, heal this grief I can't carry alone. Let it be more than a sentence. Let it be your whispered plea, your quiet surrender. Type it with your heart, not just your hands. Maybe, just maybe, your healing starts here. And just when you think this is the limit of what a heart can bear, there's another story in the Quran, one that will show you what it means to feel broken, not by others, but by your own reflection. He stood there, heart pounding, tongue heavy, gripped by a fear deeper than words. Not fear of death, not fear of failure, but fear of not being enough. Musa, A.S., chosen by Allah to face the most powerful tyrant on earth, didn't feel worthy of the task. He didn't feel capable. He didn't feel prepared. In fact, he begged Allah to send someone else in his place. And who can blame him? When Allah told him to confront Pharaoh, the very man he had fled years ago, all his insecurities rushed to the surface. I stutter. I can't speak clearly. I'm not strong enough. I'm broken. Sound familiar? How many times have you looked at a challenge, a calling, a responsibility, and felt paralyzed by the voice that says, you're not good enough for this? Maybe it's your spiritual life. You feel like no matter how much you pray, it's never enough. Maybe it's your relationships. You feel like a constant disappointment. Or maybe it's that quiet, brutal voice inside that whispers, why would Allah choose someone like you to carry anything sacred? The anguish of inadequacy steals your peace because it convinces you that you're beyond redemption, beyond purpose, beyond Allah's plan. But here's what Musa A.S. teaches us, that it's not our perfection that qualifies us. It's our willingness to show up despite the imperfections. When Musa poured his heart out to Allah, confessing his fear and his weaknesses, what did Allah do? He didn't say, you're right, let me find someone better. He answered his plea with love. My Lord, expand for me my chest and ease for me my task. Surah Taha 20:25-26. This dua wasn't just about eloquence, it was about capacity. Musa didn't ask to be made flawless, he asked to be made able. And that's the difference between relying on yourself and relying on the one who created you. Because Allah doesn't need you to be perfect, He needs you to trust that He is. You might think your flaws disqualify you, but what if the very thing you're ashamed of is the thing Allah wants to use to show His power through you? What if your stutter is what makes the message more real? What if your brokenness is the reason your healing will become someone else's hope? Your self-doubt doesn't define your worth. Your dua does. Let that sink in. When you feel small, overwhelmed, unworthy, don't suppress it. Say what Musa said. Pour it into dua. Let your fear become fuel for connection with Allah. Let your insecurities drive you to the one who holds all strength. That is how anguish begins to lose its grip on your heart. And here's the irony. We live in a world that tells you to believe in yourself, but the Quran teaches you something far more liberating, to believe in Allah through yourself. Not because you're enough on your own, but because with Allah, you are exactly what you need to be. So if you've been feeling like you're falling short spiritually, if you look at others and think, they're better Muslims than I'll ever be, remind yourself, Allah chose Musa, AS, with all his fear, all his stuttering, all his self-doubt. He didn't pick the loudest. He picked the one who was honest enough to say, I can't do this without you. If this message has touched your heart, click on the like button, not just as support, but as a testimony that you are choosing to rise despite your doubt. And share this video with someone you know is silently struggling with the weight of never feeling enough. Let them know Allah's mercy isn't reserved for the perfect. Comment below, Ya Allah, expand my chest and ease my path. Let this be your turning point. Let your prayer declare what your fear has tried to silence, that you believe Allah is greater than your weakness. But don't think this story ends with courage alone, because there's something in Musa's journey that most people overlook. Something that reveals exactly what Allah does when you step forward while still shaking inside. He sat in the stillness of his home. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was painful. The air was heavy, not because of age, but because of prayers that had never been answered. His beard had gone white, his bones were frail, and yet, Prophet Zachariah, AS, still raised his hands, still whispered requests, still cried into the night, asking for what everyone else had already written off as impossible. A child, a miracle, a legacy, but more than that, a sign that Allah was still near, that his voice still mattered, that the anguish in his chest hadn't been forgotten by the one above the heavens. How many people today know this exact pain? Not the longing for a child necessarily, but the emptiness that comes when you pray and nothing seems to change. When you make dua until your voice is hoarse, until your tears run dry, and still you wait. You start to wonder, did he hear me? Am I not worthy of a response? Has Allah forgotten me? This is the anguish that doesn't scream. It quietly steals your peace. It whispers, maybe I'm not chosen. Maybe this silence is rejection. But the Quran breaks that lie with a single verse, a single sentence that Zachariah AS speaks with such tender faith, it cuts through centuries of doubt. Never have I been in my supplication to you, my Lord, unhappy. Surah Maryam 19-4. Let that sink in. He wasn't just patient, he was grateful even in the waiting. He didn't let the silence become despair. He didn't let delay become distance. He knew that being heard was not dependent on being answered immediately, because Allah listens even when the response is still on its way. But here's the thing, many people confuse Allah's silence with absence. And that's the lie anguish wants you to believe, that your unanswered prayers are proof of disconnection, that your waiting is pointless, that your effort is wasted. But what if Allah is teaching you that his delay is part of his design, that the waiting is the womb of transformation, not punishment? Zachariah wasn't just asking for a child, he was asking for a sign of continued closeness. And in return, Allah gave him Yahya, As, not just any child, but one whom the Quran describes as noble, pure, and a leader. That kind of gift doesn't come rushed, it comes right on time. So here's a hard question. Do you only worship Allah when he gives you what you want? Or do you trust him even when the answer is not yet? Because true spiritual maturity is not measured by how loud your dua is, but by how much you believe in the one you're whispering to, even when everything feels quiet. If you're in a season of silence where your duas seem to echo back to you, remember this. Delay is not denial. Silence is not absence. Waiting is not being forgotten. Every second you spend raising your hands is an act of worship, being recorded with precision. Every tear you cry out of longing is not falling in vain. Allah collects them all. And yet, many people still walk away from dua. They say things like, "I tried that, it didn't work." But wait, who said dua is a transaction? Dua is connection. It's not a vending machine where you input effort and expect output. It's a conversation between a heart in need and the one who loves you more than your own mother. What if your unanswered dua is actually the reason your heart has stayed tethered to Allah all this time? What if the delay is a mercy, not a test? Comment below, "Ya Allah, I trust you even in the silence." Say it not just as a phrase, but as a personal declaration that your hope is not based on how fast the relief comes, but on who you're waiting for. And if you've ever felt this message reflect your own story, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone you know is quietly breaking, waiting for a sign that Allah still hears them. Be the reason someone remembers they are never truly alone. But before we move on, let me leave you with this. Zachariah A.S. didn't just pray once. He made dua consistently, with hope and softness. His voice never hardened, even when the years piled up. And when Allah finally responded, it wasn't just with a child. It was with a name never given before, a miracle wrapped in divine uniqueness. So the next time you feel your soul aching from the weight of unfulfilled hopes, remember this man, remember his prayer. Remember that Allah chooses when to respond, not to test your patience, but to perfect your reward. And just when you think your dua has been lost in the silence, something breathtaking may already be on its way. But if you think that's where the surprises of the Quran end, wait until you hear about a man who didn't just battle doubt, but survived pain so deep it made even the angels weep. He was once surrounded by everything: wealth, health, family, status. There wasn't a corner of his life untouched by ease. And then it was all taken, one by one, piece by piece, like the petals of a flower being torn by the wind. Ayub A.S. didn't just lose his health. He lost his children, his fortune. His body deteriorated. His skin, once firm and youthful, was now afflicted by disease. His friends disappeared. His community abandoned him. Even his own people whispered that surely this must be a punishment. But here's what they didn't understand. His pain didn't mean he was cursed, it meant he was chosen. What happens when your mind becomes your battlefield? When you wake up already exhausted, not from physical labor, but from carrying invisible wounds, anxiety, shame, hopelessness, intrusive thoughts, silent storms tearing you apart, and worst of all, the feeling that if you admit it, people will say your faith is weak. But is it really? Or is it that your struggle is actually a sign that you're still fighting to hold on? The anguish of internal battles is one of the most misunderstood forms of pain, because it doesn't leave visible scars. You can be surrounded by people, yet feel entirely alone. You can be praying, fasting, doing dhikr, and still feel like there's a war raging inside. And the world will look at you and say, just be grateful, just have more iman. But what if they're missing something sacred? Ayub A.S. was a prophet, beloved by Allah, and still he suffered so deeply that even the angels observed his state. But he never lost his belief in the mercy of Allah. He never let his inner turmoil destroy his hope. And in one of the most powerful, vulnerable moments in the Quran, he turns to Allah, not with complaints, but with a whisper of truth. Indeed, adversity has touched me, and you are the most merciful of the merciful. Surah Al-Anbiya 21:83. He didn't say, why me? He didn't say, I don't deserve this. He simply acknowledged his pain and affirmed Allah's mercy in the same breath. That's the secret. That's the balance. That's the kind of surrender that defeats even the most vicious inner battles. So the next time your mind tells you you're broken beyond repair, remember this moment. Ayub wasn't healed because he was strong. He was healed because he was real. He spoke to Allah from a place of rawness. He didn't try to sound perfect. He didn't mask his desperation. He let the weight of his suffering rest at Allah's door, and that's where healing begins. Let's ask something hard. Who told you that pain means you're doing something wrong? Why do we assume that peace only belongs to those without struggles? The Quran repeatedly shows us the opposite, that the most beloved servants of Allah faced the deepest anguish, not because they were distant from Allah, but because they were destined for something greater. Maybe your struggle isn't a punishment, it's a purification. Maybe your thoughts, your fears, your emotional exhaustion are not signs of weakness, but signs of a heart that is still alive. Because the dead don't feel, the broken-hearted cry, the believers wrestle, the sincere fall and rise, again and again. What if I told you that Allah loves the effort you're making more than the version of you who never needed to try? That your sabre in the shadows matters more than the ease people parade on the outside? That your tears have a place in divine record, just like Ayub's did? And so we must reframe the battle. Your negative thoughts are not who you are. They are Shaitan's whispers and echoes of trauma, but they are not your soul. And Allah does not judge you by your thoughts. He judges by your intentions, your actions, your will to return. Let your inner war become your place of worship. When your mind screams, respond with dhikr. When your thoughts spiral, anchor yourself in istighfar. When you feel abandoned by people, remember, Allah never left. Let your tawakkul become your therapy. Let your sabre become your sword. Comment below, Ya Allah, I surrender my pain to you. Let this be the moment where you stop pretending you're fine and finally allow yourself to heal. Not through silence, but through connection. Through letting Allah into your inner battle. And if this message found you in a moment where you felt like giving up, share it with someone who needs to hear that even the storm in their mind can be turned into a garden of mercy by Allah's will. Be the voice that reminds them their pain is seen, their fight is honored. But if you think this is the end of what emotional pain can reveal about divine mercy, think again. Because there's still a moment in the Quran when a prophet questions the stars, the moon, the sun, seeking more than answers. He was seeking meaning, and what he found has the power to realign your entire existence. He stood under a sky full of stars, brilliant, breathtaking, silent. The night was deep, and the questions in his heart even deeper. Prophet Ibrahim Isis wasn't rebelling. He was searching for meaning, for something greater than the rituals and idols of his people. They bowed to what could not speak. They prayed to what could not respond. And he needed something more, something real, something that answered the cry of a soul aching for purpose. He looked to the stars and said, "This is my Lord." But then they faded. He turned to the moon and thought, "Perhaps this is it." But it too disappeared. And then came the sun, bright, overwhelming. Surely this must be it. But as it too vanished, something clicked inside him. The truth is not what comes and goes. And so, in one of the most profound declarations of spiritual awakening ever recorded, he turned away from all that faded and turned his heart entirely to the one who never does. Indeed, I have turned my face toward He who created the heavens and the earth. Wait in Surah Al-An'am 679. How many today live under the same sky, but feel completely lost? You wake up, go through the motions, perform your tasks, but inside there's a hollowness, a gnawing emptiness. You wonder, why am I even here? What's the point? And no matter how much you achieve, it never fills that aching space in your chest, because what you're missing isn't success, it's connection, not movement, but meaning. That ache, that feeling that life is passing you by and you're just floating through it. That's not depression. That's your soul calling out for its creator. The anguish of purposelessness is one of the most paralyzing pains, because from the outside, everything may look fine. You smile, you laugh, you function, but inside, you're withering, and no one sees it. Not because they're blind, but because this kind of pain hides in silence. But the Quran doesn't ignore it. It addresses it head on. Ibrahim A.S. wasn't content with surface-level beliefs. He didn't settle for the noise around him. He dared to look deeper, question harder, and turn completely toward the only source of true peace, the creator of existence. And that turning wasn't passive. It was active, intentional, defiant against falsehood, bold in its sincerity. So let me ask you, have you truly turned your face toward Allah, or have you been chasing stars that always disappear? What if that ache you feel is not a flaw, but an invitation? What if the emptiness isn't there to destroy you, but to direct you, to wake you up from the illusion that this dunya can satisfy a soul made for eternity? Let this be your moment of turning. Not just externally, but internally. The moment you stop feeding the void with temporary distractions and start nourishing your soul with divine truth. Start asking different questions, not how can I be happy, but how can I live a life that pleases the one who made me? Because once you anchor your identity in Allah, the noise quiets, the confusion clears. You stop seeking validation from people who don't even know themselves. You stop chasing after meaning in places it was never meant to be found. And here's a truth many don't want to face. You were not created for comfort. You were created for purpose. And that purpose is not to impress, accumulate, or be applauded. It is to worship, to know Allah, to walk in His light, even when the world around you chooses darkness. So how do you reclaim meaning? You begin with sincere intention. You start seeing every moment, every conversation, every trial, every blessing as part of a divine curriculum. You let the Qur'an become your compass. You align your daily actions with what brings you closer to Jannah, not just closer to success in dunya. Comment below, Ya Allah, return my heart to you. Make this your declaration that you no longer want to live numb, that you are ready to awaken, not just your mind, but your soul. And if this message touched something deep in you, share it with someone else who's walking through life feeling lost. Your click could be the reason someone else rediscovers why they were created. Your like could turn into someone's turning point. If this reminder realigned your heart even pouco, clique em gostei como ato de gratidão a Allah. Não por mim, não pelo canal, mas porque você sentiu que precisava disso. E talvez alguém mais também precise. But don't leave yet. Because while rediscovering meaning is powerful, there's still one fear that quietly eats away at the soul, the fear that the pain you carry will never end. And what the Quran reveals about that might change everything you thought you knew about divine mercy. He stood alone, not for a day, not for a year, but for nearly a millennium. For 950 years, Prophet Nuh, A.S., called his people to truth, to mercy, to Allah's forgiveness. And they laughed, they mocked, they ignored. Generations came and went, and yet he remained, unshaken, faithful, resilient. Why? Because his peace wasn't tied to people's approval. It wasn't based on how fast relief arrived. It was rooted in a quiet certainty that Allah sees, Allah hears, and Allah never abandons those who trust Him. Have you ever felt like the pain will never end? Like you're not even living anymore? You're just surviving? You wake up and it's heavy. You go to sleep and it's heavier. You function, you smile. You say, I'm fine when someone asks. But inside, you're tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of carrying wounds that no one sees. Tired of waiting for a peace that never seems to come. And maybe the darkest thought of all is this: what if it never gets better? What if I'm stuck like this forever? But what if that thought is the door to something deeper? The Quran doesn't pretend life is easy. It doesn't silence pain. It meets it. It answers it. And one of its most powerful answers to the fear that you'll never be free is found in a verse spoken by a man who stood longer than any of us would dare to. And I said, ask forgiveness of your Lord. Indeed, He is ever a perpetual forgiver. Surah Nuh 71:10. On the surface, that might sound simple, but if you keep reading, Allah tells us what follows istighfar. He will send rain from the sky in abundance and give you increase in wealth and children and provide you gardens and rivers. Meaning, your plea for forgiveness is not just about sin, it's about opening the floodgates of divine mercy. Pain doesn't just dissolve with time, that's a myth. The anguish that steals your peace doesn't simply vanish. It must be transformed, and only divine mercy can do that. So the question is, have you turned to Allah with your pain, or have you only tried to escape from it? We often think Allah is only near when we're pure, strong, spiritually on fire. But the truth is, some of Allah's greatest gifts come when we are broken, when we fall to our knees, not out of strength, but because we can't stand anymore. Nuh, A.S., knew this. After centuries of rejection, what did he turn to? Not strategy, not people, not revenge. He turned to istighfar, because in it lies a secret few understand. Seeking forgiveness is not just a cleansing, it's a release. It releases your heart from guilt, your mind from overthinking, and your soul from hopelessness. Maybe the reason peace still hasn't come is because you've been trying to earn it instead of asking Allah to gift it. You've tried to fix your life with logic, hustle, and willpower, but ignored the one act that unlocks divine tranquility, a sincere, whispering return to the most merciful. Have you truly allowed yourself to believe that your Lord wants to heal you? Or have you assumed your suffering is permanent because you've measured Allah's mercy by your pain? That's where so many go wrong. They think, if He loved me, I wouldn't hurt like this. But that's not the message of the Quran. The message is this: your pain might be the very rope that pulls you back to Him, and in that return, in that moment of surrender, you will taste a peace the world cannot manufacture. When you say astaghfirullah with sincerity, you're not just asking to be cleaned, you're asking to be comforted. And the one you're asking has named himself Al-Ghaffar, the constant forgiver. It's not just something he does, it's who he is. So how do you move forward when you're drowning in emotional pain? Start with istighfar. Make it a habit, make it your breath, make it your morning and your midnight, not just as a ritual, but as a declaration. Ya Allah, I can't carry this alone anymore. Comment below, Ya Allah, set me free with your mercy. Let your words be a witness that you're ready to stop resisting and start surrendering, that you believe your Lord hasn't brought you this far to abandon you here. This message could change someone's life. Share it with a soul that feels forgotten, hopeless, tired, because sometimes one reminder is all it takes for Allah to turn someone's entire story around. And if this reminder touched your heart, click, like as an act of trust in Allah's promise to bring peace, even after long years of pain. Not because it fixes everything, but because it's a step toward healing, toward Him. You've walked through the fire, you've carried the weight. And tonight, maybe tonight is when the chains begin to fall, not because the pain ends, but because you finally stopped carrying it alone. You didn't find this video by accident. If your heart stayed with me until this very moment, it's because Allah is already working within you. That storm inside, that heavy anguish stealing your peace, it's not here to destroy you, it's here to wake you up. Every pain you've carried, every silent scream, every night you cried alone, it was seen, it was heard, and it was never ignored. Throughout this journey, we've walked through the Quran's most profound answers to the deepest human pain. We stood beside Musa, AS, at the edge of the sea, trapped and terrified. We wept with Yaqub, AS, whose grief made him blind. We felt the raw betrayal of Yusuf, AS, the loneliness of Maryam, AS, and the crushing silence that met Zachariah's, AS, prayers. But in each story there was one constant. Allah never abandoned them, and He will never abandon you. That anguish that steals your peace, it's not stronger than the mercy of your Lord. Allah has shown us through His book that even the heaviest pain can become the starting point of freedom. Through sabr, through tawakkul, through turning our faces and our wounds fully to Him. The Quran doesn't dismiss your suffering. It speaks into it, lifts it, and transforms it. You are not broken beyond repair. You are being refined for something greater. And if you've reached this point in the video, it means your heart is still beating with hope, which means you're ready. So let's step into something sacred together. Before we begin this final prayer, take a deep breath. Close your eyes if you can. Turn your palms to the sky. Imagine you're standing before your Lord, the one who knows everything you've been through. This is your moment. Let your heart speak. Let your soul rise. Allah is listening. O Allah, the one who knows what no one else sees, the one who heals what no doctor can touch, I turn to you, carrying the heaviness in my chest. Ya Allah, remove the anguish that has stolen my peace. Calm my anxious thoughts. Release me from the pain I no longer know how to carry. You are the most merciful. Have mercy on this heart that feels tired, lost, and overwhelmed. Where I feel despair, pour hope. Where I feel broken, pour healing. Where I feel weakness, pour strength. Ya Allah, increase me in sabr. Let me be patient not only in hardship, but patient in waiting for your relief. Let me trust that every delay is for my good. Let me believe that your timing is always perfect, even when I don't understand. Replace my fear with faith. Replace my confusion with clarity. Replace my sorrow with sakina, the divine tranquility that only you can send. If I've strayed, bring me back. If I've fallen, lift me. If I've been silent, forgive me. Let my return begin now. Let my soul be free. Let this be the night you set me free, Ya Allah. Ameen. If your heart whispered Ameen with me, then know Allah is already responding. Not in the way we always expect, but in the way we most need. If this message found you, it means you were meant to hear it. Your healing is beginning. You are not alone on this path. You are part of something bigger now, a community of hearts walking toward Allah together. Write in the comments, I trust Allah. Let that be your public act of faith. Let your words be your witness. Let them inspire others who are afraid to believe again. Share this video with someone whose soul is drowning in silence. Sharing a message from the Quran could be a sadaqah jariyah, a charity that keeps giving even long after this moment ends. Subscribe to this channel, not just to follow, but to build a home. A place where you're constantly reminded of who Allah is, who you are, and who you can become. This is where Qur'an meets heart, where wounds find healing, where stories restore faith. And don't stop here. If this video spoke to your soul, then what comes next could change everything. The next video on your screen holds a message your heart has been waiting for. Watch it. Don't let this be the end. Let it be the beginning. Because what you're about to discover might be the very answer you've been praying for. Indeed, with hardship comes ease. Surah Ash-Shar 94-6. Let that verse seal this moment. Carry it with you. Let it echo louder than the fear. And if you haven't yet, subscribe, like, and share. Not just for you, but for every soul that needs to remember. Peace is possible. Allah is near, and healing has already begun. Your interaction helps spread this message further than you'll ever know. And maybe, just maybe, that's part of your purpose too.